6:51. I don't think we formally called the witness, so Mr. Jorde.
No, I'm looking for the witness I wanted. Oh, just like so sneaky. Oh my goodness, okay.
That was rough, and it was on the record.
Wow, there you are. Okay, well, this lovely lady, Jann Reinig, calls the next witness.
Okay, Reinig.
Reinig.
Thank you. All right. Go ahead and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is true and accurate?
I do.
Thank you.
Will you please state your name?
Jann Reinig.
And Ms. Reinig, you own land potentially affected by Summit's proposed hazardous pipeline, is that correct?
Yes, I do.
And what county is that in?
That's in Shelby County.
And the actual owner is an entity called Productive Farms LLC, is that right?
Yes.
And you prepared pre-filed testimony along with certain attachments that are exhibits in this matter, is that correct?
Yes.
And if we went through all of that, would the answers you gave in your pre-filed testimony be substantially similar if we went through that again today?
Yes.
I would offer exhibits, landowner exhibits 365 through 371, which are Ms. Reinig's pre-filed testimony and attachments.
Are there objections? Seeing none, the board will admit.
Thank you. And ma'am, since the time of putting together your pre-filed testimony, do you have any corrections you'd like the board to know about?
Well, one thing, I don't know if this is the time, but the tenant that we have listed on my Exhibit H is not correct. He is not my tenant. So I don't know if is this the time to check that or not.
Well, that's fine. Go ahead. So the person listed isn't your tenant, and you just want to make that correction?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other corrections you can think of at this time you'd like the board to know?
I can't think of any. I have maybe an update, but.
And I think we might get to updates when it gets back to me.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
All right. With that, I tender the witness for cross.
There you are. Mr. Taylor.
I'm Wally Taylor. I represent the Sierra Club. And it looks like you and Lydia Reinig own Productive Farms. Is that correct?
Yes. That's my daughter.
And you inherited this from your parents?
No. My husband has passed, but he bought this farm in 1973. He took a risk and took out a loan and wanted to farm. He'd come home from the Navy, and so he wanted to get started. So he bought the farm, and then 10 years later we were married and moved to the farm.
Okay. Can we bring up the KMZ? According to Mr. Jorde's list here, it looks like you have 3 parcels.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so there are 2 in the top portion here in red, and then the third one is the bottom.
Well, the third one should be attached to the 2 north ones. Well, that isn't right. There's 3 pieces. There should be a narrow strip to the north, that goes up to the road, which is called 1200. It's a dirt road. And then this piece in here, and then underneath there should be a little bit more. So this is really not right at all.
Oh.
Yeah. This might be, I don't know. It's just different. Oh, there. Okay, that looks better. Yeah. Okay, you were too far up. Okay. Okay, there's a narrow piece, but then that comes straight down there. Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
That's good. Thank you. Yeah, that's it.
Before we get going too far, just a reminder, when you're talking about the parcels, just describe them rather than say there or
Yes.
or that. Thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, you're all right. Just a
All right.
reminder.
Thank
You're fine.
So just for the record here, your parcels are that narrow strip on the north end there, and then how far down does your property go?
Well, these are the ones that are involved in the pipeline. The black next to the north of that jog, that first jog. Okay, that's how do I explain that? There's a black strip by the narrow strip to the east side of it. That's also my property. That right there, yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then we go down. Okay, and then go to the left where that white row is. To the left, to the west. Maybe I should use this myself. Yeah, there. Okay, that, and then go down. That's my property also.
Okay.
Yeah. And it goes on down. Yeah.
Okay.
To the south.
And in this property, row crops,
Yes, it's row crops.
all of it.
Yes.
Okay. The corn and beans, I assume.
Yes.
It looks like there might be some terraces or some waterways.
There are 5 terraces, and let me use this if I can. Right here is the Cade Creek that comes down here. It's fairly deep. It's too deep for our farm machinery to go through. So the only access we have for this piece right here is up here on the dirt road. It's a B road, and you have to come in from the west. And so this is our access, and this is where the pipeline is planning to be. And so they put 2 of these boxes right there, and that's all the driveway. So our access is going to be questionable. Then you come down here, and like I said, it goes over here to the west and south and over. But there are 5 terraces. So this.
Ms. Reinig, can you point it?
Point it up here. I'm sorry. I guess I thought it would go up there. I'm
No,
sorry.
You're
Okay.
good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm up here. There are 5 terraces on the property. This is not flat when you have 5 terraces. This terrace is quite large and quite tall. So when you come in for these 2 pieces, you have to go around and then down here. Then we have a narrow strip along this lane. We used to live here, but we don't live here anymore. So we have a access for just these 2 pieces, which would be over here too. And so, so then we have a tile line here and a tile line next to Cade Creek up here on the north side. And my tenant thought maybe there was some, or he said there are some smaller kind of like arteries off of that pipeline there. This is a low spot in the property. And so he asked, actually one of the agents from Summit suggested that I ask for the crossover for farm equipment. I don't remember exactly what that's called. And my tenant would say he would like to have it right in there. I don't know if I can ask that now, but anyway, that was suggested so that this pipeline, as it's proposed here, is cutting the entire farm in half. And when my tenant saw this, he said, they just killed the farm. And that's kind of what is happening because the access is pretty complicated. And any time to get over here, that pipeline has to be crossed.
Okay, so I'll try to clarify the record here a little bit. When you say the pipeline cuts your property in half, you're including the green area to the west of the red area.
Yeah, where's my line? I'm lost. Let's see, up here. So that's the farm.
Uh-huh.
And then this pipeline comes right through the middle. I had thought that it was coming up the fence line and then it would make a jog and then go up. And just in July did I find out that they're coming right through the middle.
Okay. Now there are 2 sort of wavy white lines, one on the north and one toward the south.
These and this. I think it's snow.
Right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a terrace? Is that?
Oh, this. Okay, I'm sorry. This is Cade Creek. This is the creek, and it that and the 2 narrow strips up there are 33 acres of ground. And like I said, this is the only access. I mean, the access to this piece, this 33 acres, is there off of that dirt road. And we can't go from parcel 1 to parcel 2, which would be the north and the middle.
Okay, and then the pipeline would cross that creek.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
And the two tile lines, and one terrace.
do you know how they would intend to cross that creek?
Well, I hadn't even heard until this project started, but I would assume they would bore under the creek. That's what they're telling me. I mean, someone's not saying that, but in general, I've been hearing that this is what they do with creeks and rivers. They just go under them. So I don't know. And then the same thing would be up here where the dirt road comes. So for them to go on, they would have to bore, I would assume, under the dirt road.
Okay, the dirt road goes east and west?
Yes,
Right.
right along there.
Did you talk to some of its agents about crossing the roads in the creek and terraces?
No, not exactly. I have talked to them about different things, but I was just kind of dumbfounded when I found out it was going through the middle. I was kind of speechless, and that was in July, so I haven't talked to them about that particular thing. I did have an agent who I said recommended that we have the place to cross over, whatever that is called, and she also recommended that I ask for GPS so that when these tile lines, when they're finished with the pipeline, that you can take a GPS and see that your tile lines are still in working order, which I hadn't heard of. And she also recommended that I ask for them to go under my tile lines, at least 1 foot under the tile line, and I assume they have a machine that can figure out how that works. I don't know exactly the depth of the tiles.
That was my next question.
Okay.
You don't know the depth?
I'm assuming it's 5 feet, but I really don't know that for sure.
Okay.
If my husband had been here, I think I mentioned my husband had passed, and he was meticulous. He would have been able to tell you everything about this. And so I'm just trying to represent him and my daughter by being here. Yeah.
So do you have a tenant on that property now?
Yes, we call him a tenant, but 30-some years ago, he came to us when he was 19, and we never called him our hired man. We just called him our kind of like our best man, our guy. And he worked with my husband for 30-some years, side by side, every day. I don't know that they ever had an argument. They were very much alike. They did a lot of machinery work. They could fix something better than the way it came. And so when my husband passed 2 years ago, before he passed, he asked, this man's name is Daryl, what Daryl would like to rent, if anything. And so he, unfortunately for him, picked this farm for one of the things that he picked to rent. So he's my renter. I call him, but I guess you call it a tenant. So Daryl is very concerned about going over that pipeline again and again and again, because that's the only way that he will be able to get to this part of the farm. And so I went to the FSA office recently to see about CRP, and the lady said, oh, you can probably get it. But then she said, what the top price would probably be, but she wasn't making any promises. But I just wanted some options, because I thought it was going to be on this fence line, and then I was going to say, okay, we're going to make a buffer zone, and you don't even have to get close to it. And then I would have felt more comfortable. So that's kind of where we are with that. Yes.
In your written testimony, you seem to indicate that Summit really hasn't told you where the final route of the pipeline is. Is that correct?
Well, it hadn't until this lady that I went to a safety meeting in July in Denison, and we had a chance, there were several of us that went, to ask some questions. And so I was talking to a man named Dave Durin, and I was asking him about these forever easements, that are going to last forever, because I think that's unbelievable that anybody could ask for that. And he said, well, he couldn't address that. We hear that quite a bit. But if I would give him my number, he would call someone, and would that be okay? And that person could call. And I said yes, because I had a lot of questions that have not been answered. So a lady called, and we visited. And then within that conversation, I said, I don't even know where the route is. I have 3 maps here, and the scale of miles are different on each map. So I think I spent a day trying to figure out with my little ruler in 16th inches. Then I got some papers, and there's numbers on the back, so it probably would have all been there. But anyway, they didn't fit together. And I guess I just could not believe that anybody would put that through the middle of somebody's farm. I mean, that was just the worst that was like, this is it. This is really bad, because as Daryl said, it's basically destroying the place because the access is very complicated. And then to have that through the middle. So, anyway, I didn't know until July. Then the lady stopped with a map. And then I had also had a question about how many pipelines are going through, because we've heard that, it could be more because it's 50 feet. It's a big space. And she had underlined and put a tab, and she said only one. And then I thought, well, why didn't I ask her later on, when this changes from Summit to someone else, are they able to put another pipeline in? I'm not smart enough to think ahead. I just got my question for that time, but I thought, okay, there's a lot of room there. There'd be a lot of money if somebody else had a pipeline. So that was another concern. I really don't know. There's just a lot of things we don't know. Yeah.
So, on the KMZ map here, the vertical white line is apparently where Summit now says the pipeline is going. Was that your understanding of where it would be?
No, I thought it was going to be along the west fence, and then they would make a little jog and then go up to that. Well, here I am. Sorry. My magic finger. I thought they would come up here along the west, because that would keep this all in one nice piece, and then make a jog, because I've seen they've been making jogs, and then go on up. That they'd have to do that line, because this goes into my neighbors, which would have been really nice, but I wouldn't do that to my neighbors. So I thought, well, they can make a jog and go. But I was wrong.
So there's that area just to the east edge of the bottom of your red the parcel there. That's a former residence. Nobody lives there now.
There is someone, I do not know these people. I knew the previous owners. This has been sold a couple of times since we lived there, but there is someone who lives there.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. There's a wonderful old house that I did a lot of fixing on. I really liked. Yeah, I even cried, but it didn't do any good. We had to move anyway. But we moved to a place on the highway where my husband's mother had lived. See, this is a 1/4-mile lane. In summer, it's gorgeous. Winter is not quite so much fun. So location. Yeah.
So how far can we figure out the house there would be from the pipeline?
It would be the house.
Like 1100,
Can't read it.
1132.
1132. Well,
Okay.
1131.48.
Do you know where the nearest emergency personnel would come from if there were a rupture in the pipeline?
Hopefully they would come from Harlan, and that's probably 4 to 5 miles straight, straight east of this location of the farm. Uh-huh. And there's some smaller towns around. I know they would show up. I don't know what kind of, what they would be able to do, I guess, if this is a carbon dioxide leak. I don't think they're prepared yet, but hopefully they'll get there. I don't know.
It's a volunteer force?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have any concern about what would happen to the terraces if the pipeline goes through?
Well, it would be this main one here, and then I don't know how close, how accurate that is. My daughter and I had talked about that quite a bit, and we were wondering about if you go through, that would be really bad, right through the terrace. So if you go under, that would not be good either, because it's going to be a pipe, and then near or under that pipe would be a reason for water to start running. So I think it would modify the effectiveness of the terrace. It's going to change the work that the terrace will be able to do. And this is all highly erodible land, this HEL land, the whole piece. And so it's had a lot of conservation work done. And I keep checking in with my tenant, because like I said, I don't have my husband to get my husband did notebooks of every year, things that had been done, what had been cut for cleaned off of terraces, what had been planted, and he was very meticulous with all of that. but I needed some interpretation. So my tenant said that they had been, working on things for years, and that this had been no-till for 30 years. He's been with us that long. So they've tried really hard to take good care of it. I do want to mention with my husband, maybe this is getting off, but one time a lady called our house and she said, my dad has a question for Clarence. My dad wants to know, he has to sell his farm, will Clarence buy it? And she said, my dad said, I've watched Clarence with his farming on his own farm, and he said, I want someone to take care of my farm like that. And so I thought that was a pretty good compliment, so I wanted to get that in. So Clarence has been very meticulous, and he was amazed. He didn't expect, he was pretty humble, but that was a really nice compliment, yeah.
For the record, Clarence was your husband.
Yes, sorry, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think you kind of mentioned a little bit about your tenant or your hired man, whatever you want to call him, was concerned about the soil and the compaction and so on. What do you know about that in more detail?
Well, I know that, excuse me, that compaction is not a good thing. I've listened to one of the professionals we had from Iowa State here that had been interviewed, and I thought I knew how important topsoil was, but I never thought about how important the subsoil is, and I wasn't aware of how deep the roots go, especially if it's dry for corn to go down so far. And so if this ground is compacted, that crop is going to suffer. The yield will not be there. And like I said, it's highly erodible, so it's, it doesn't need a lot of movement. It doesn't want a lot of something coming through and tearing it up. And to restore that, it's going to take a long time, if ever, to get it back to what it should be.
How has the threat of eminent domain figured into how you've responded to this situation?
Well, I think eminent domain is just beyond comprehension. I mean, that's definitely the last straw. I would never have believed in my whole life, maybe I'm just naive, that a private company would have the power of the government behind them to be able to come and say to Iowa landowners, we're going to take your property if you don't sign this easement. I didn't think it could happen. So I'm definitely not for it.
Did Summit Land Agents present it to you that way?
Well, I understood what eminent domain, I know what that is. That means they just take it no matter what. So I didn't really need an explanation. I was aware of what that was, yes.
Is there tile on your property? Drain tile?
Yes, we have two tile lines. One is right north, get my little buzzer going here. It comes right in through here and goes down, goes out into the neighbors. And then the second one is down here. This is an older tile, according to my tenant. He's explaining this to me. This part he thought was old tile. He said this was before him, the clay tile. And then this part was the new plastic and goes into the neighbors. So, yeah.
And that's down toward the south end of
Yes,
the
that would be on the line towards the south, and it's over 2,000 acres. I think it's, I'm sorry, not acres, 2,700 and some feet was written on one of my papers by my husband, and it's 6-inch tile. At least one of these is. I have a record for one of them.
Okay. And if you know, what is your knowledge about the extent to which damaged tile could be replaced?
Well, I think that's going to be pretty complicated because with this highly erodible soil, if they damage a tile line, then they have to bring equipment in and start digging that tile line up and out to see what it's going to be. So that would be disastrous. So I think the better thing would be for them to go under it, but if there is a break or something happens, it should be fixed. And so it will be catastrophic to the property. It will not be good for that soil. And another concern is I don't know that Summit, I guess they said they could fix it if you could get them to come, or you can hire your own person. But I'm a little concerned, and my tenant is too, about asking people to come. We have a dangerous the possibility of a very dangerous pipeline. And so if you're coming in with machinery and digging and tearing things up and moving to make fix things, maybe you just want to pass. Maybe they're not going to want to come. And it's the same thing with, we do fertilizer, like commercial. We don't do our own fertilizer or spraying anymore. We used to. And so you hire someone from a company. Well, they're saying, oh, we have to pass over this pipeline we have to pass. So there's a possibility that they will say, we don't want to come. So it causes, it spreads. It causes some problems. Yeah.
Did you have any future plans for this property other than what you've been doing with it?
Well, I had an opportunity, not for this particular property, but Harlan is to the east of us, just about 4 miles, and I have 2 brother-in-laws who do have housing developments. And so at one time, I had property closer, and my husband said, oh, don't you? And I went, no, I don't want to. So I do not plan to develop this. But we are in the line from the direction, that Harlan could eventually be developed. I don't know. I have a daughter in her 30s, and she's a professor at a university right now, so she's trying to use up some of her schooling, all the years she's had schooling. But she's with me in management, and we work together. When she was little, her dad always took her to the FSA office. So we kind of have a joke. It's like, Dad never took you to the zoo, but he took you to the FSA office. And I would always say, listen to what because I didn't want to go, listen to what your dad's saying. So I have a friend that said she'd sit there as a little girl and she would just listen. And so now, if there's something at the FSA office, they all know her. She just calls. They take care of it for her. And the same thing with our crop insurance and some of those things. We each have our things. And she sells the grain for me. Sometimes I have to call and say, Lydia, get on it. I think it's time. But we kind of have a good time with that. Yeah. So.
And that's Lydia. Right?
That's Lydia. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we've never been farm managers before, but I have always been the bookkeeper, so it's okay. Yeah.
I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Ms. Ryan.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi.
First off, I just wanted to say I enjoyed reading your testimony and learning about Clarence.
Oh, thank you.
And in part, I always enjoy seeing some of the commonalities in Iowa life. My mom went to a run-room school as well, so yeah.
I do too. Yeah.
It's more common than we think.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at that history that you had in your testimony, I really only have one question for you, and that is, what does this land mean to you, and how would this pipeline affect it?
Excuse me. I guess when you talk about land to a person who grew up on an Iowa farm, it's kind of I don't know. It's just part of us. I grew up on a Century farm in Mills County, and my 3 great nieces are now the 6th generation living on that farm. Those girls, and it's hard to explain. It's just such a part of you knowing that you're responsible to take care of this property. We bought it from this particular property from a man named Mr. Merchu, so we call it the Merchu Place. And he didn't have a family to pass it on to, and so because of that 1/4-mile lane, I think he was just anxious to get to town. And so my husband had gone to that sale, but we've had this for more than 50 years. And so each piece of property that we have, we just plan on taking care of it. And our daughter is very interested, even though she's away from home now, in farming and knows a lot about farming. She buys the seed and the fertilizer and all those kinds of things too. So I just want to keep it. I want to take care of it. I don't want it to be ruined. And I just knew that when this happened, I needed to step up and, just take a part and do what I could, because there's no way that I would want my husband to think that I just sat down on the couch and said, let's see what happens. I couldn't do that. I don't want to get off the subject, but I also feel I have a responsibility to step up and to tell people about the danger. I mean, there's a couple that lives about a mile up the road that if something happened, they're older, they couldn't even get out in a hurry, and there's someone on the other side of this hill over here going to the west. They have 2 children that have breathing problems. Everybody is just affected. And so for me to just be quiet and say, oh, I didn't know that could happen, or I don't really care because I don't live right there. I'm a couple miles away as the crow flies. But then I wonder, would the crow be able to fly? You know, if something happened, it may not even get to me. So, yeah, it's a big thing. If I can go on a little bit about safety, I had lived in Cameroon, West Africa for a few years, and Cameroon had one of the biggest CO2 explosions ever in 1986, not 1896. I'm not quite that old. 1896. It was a lake, and it's a phenomena. And you say, oh, you can't compare a pipeline to a lake, but CO2 is CO2, and it's poisonous. And so this lake turned over. The CO2 came up. More than 1,700 people were asphyxiated in their sleep. They had no idea what was happening. And so this fog or this cloud or this plume, whatever you want to call it, traveled down the low space through the valleys. It covered 4 villages. So they had 1,700 people in their sleep at night. They had 3,500 head of livestock that they counted, cattle, sheep, and goats. And one thing that was kind of interesting, it's not important, but there were chickens that survived, and no one yet to this day could figure out how these chickens could survive when it was such a serious thing. So, you know, when you know some of this, I'm not trying to say I'm brilliant, but I know that's pretty scary. And so for me to just sit back and say, so what? You know, I just have to tell. And people have a right to know what's going on. I mean, that's part of our freedom, our, you know, right to be able to speak. So, yes.
Thank you. That's
Thank
all
you.
I had.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Jorde for redirect.
Yes, thank you. Could we pull up exhibit 365 and go to page 249, please? Thank you. This is a clarification question, ma'am, to be absolutely clear. When you were talking about difficulty of access and some of the terrain features that make it difficult, what are we looking at here?
Okay, we're looking at 1200th Street. That's the north boundary of my piece of property. And this is coming in from the side that is coming in from the east off of a gravel road, turning east. And this is the side that's not probable for wide machinery to come through. And sometimes it has some ruts that are very, very deep. So this is looking pretty good, actually, for what it is. So when I mentioned that when Summit comes in, if they do, they will have to come from the opposite side. And that's how we come in, which would be from the west to get to that skinny piece of property that we have.
Okay. Yeah. And so in terms of access, it's not like you can just drive off the road here and pull on anywhere because of the elevation complication.
Right,
correct?
and so that's why I mentioned that the driveway then that would be going to the west over the hill and then up and down another hill to the west levels off a bit, and that's where the driveway is, and that's the access we have. Yes, we can't just jump over these hills, banks. Mm-hmm.
Now, I also know from getting to know you that there's a Clarence Reinig revocable trust. Does that trust own any land?
Is mentioned in this productive farms, yes. And we've divided it, among the trust, myself, and our daughter. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I just asked because if we could go back to the KMZ, please, for a second. When you first were confused about what was shown in red, it's because we were a little further south, but I thought it was showing other Reinig property.
There is other Reinig property going to the south, but mine isn't that far.
Okay,
There's
so
is there a line in there somewhere?
You're not Reinig Inc.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm Reinig Farms Corp. Yeah.
And Gerald Reinig. Okay.
Is my husband's brother.
Got it. I just wanted to be sure on that. And so then you said that if this goes through A, and then if it goes through and the line wouldn't be moved approximately 40 acres to the west on your westernmost property boundary, that you might consider taking this land out of production completely.
Well, it would be the west side, yes.
The west side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And do you sell any corn to ethanol plants ever?
I do sell to an ethanol plant, and we have a little bit of like startup stock in it, or some kind of stock in that plant. Yeah, because we wanted ethanol to be a success when it started.
And if you were to take land out of production and there would then be less corn supply for the ethanol plant, less CO2 produced for Summit, right?
True.
Okay. And the fact that you have some ownership stake in an ethanol plant, that hasn't prevented you from defending your farm or being against eminent domain, has it?
Oh, no.
Okay. You had mentioned that there was an update. Do you have any updates relative to what you've heard Summit's witnesses testify, or any difference of opinion you have based on what you heard in these proceedings?
Objection.
State the objection.
Redirect is to redirect on the cross that happened in the hearing today, not for a sort of surrebuttal to everything that has happened in the hearing up to date.
Mr. Jorde.
So 7.10 sub 2 talks about the witness may be permitted to correct or update pre-filed testimony, and I'm simply asking her if she has an update.
Your Honor, that is an update, so if she said I was visited by Summit 6 times, and since then she's visited them 2 more times, that is an update to what is in her direct testimony. It's not an update to say, well, do you have any brand new testimony based on other things you've heard independent of your pre-filed testimony?
I don't quite know how to answer this
Just,
comment.
just hold on real quick. The lawyers are being lawyers again.
Okay, sorry.
Hold on real quick. Mr. Jorde, it seems like a stretch to call that redirect, so if you want to rephrase that or tighten it down.
Okay. Well, based on the questions you were asked in redirect, does anything else come to mind that you believe is relevant to those questions that I haven't asked you?
Objection. Again, it's not a time for sort of wide open-ended questions. It has to be a specific question. And redirect is to address specific points of other cross, not just tell me whatever you think.
Well, then I need to make an offer of proof with the witness if we can't get it in through my questions.
I may have invited that by saying rephrase. When I say let's try to stick to redirect, I mean let's try to stick to redirect, not just word it a little differently. So please proceed. Well, okay. You were asked questions about your property by Mr. Taylor, and then the proximity to the home you used to live. Did we cover all of the safety concerns that you had relative to that property and the pipeline on your land?
I would say no. We haven't really talked about liability, and I consider liability being a part of safety. If the safety problems are all taken care of, the safety is lined up accurately, and I feel confident with it, I don't have to worry about liability. But liability through this whole project has been a big thing to me because I am alone. I don't have the advice of my husband, so I get to just do all the worrying when he'd say, don't worry, it's all mine. And so all I can think of is if there is an accident on my property, heaven forbid that someone would be hurt or killed, but I would be responsible. I would not have liability insurance. 2 years ago in March, I became the owner of going for the insurance. My husband used to do that. So I went to the insurance company and started asking about liability insurance, and they hadn't heard about the pipeline yet, but they know about it now. And so they gave me some papers. I went home, I read through it, and I could see they were talking about pollutants and all the things that pollutants do. And I thought, hey, I'm not going to have any insurance. So safety, liability, and no insurance are very frightening to me. I have more property than this. I could lose everything I own if I was ever sued. So to me, I want all the safety rules I can get. I want them on paper. I want them to be effective and to use them. I mean, it's very frightening. I do not want that pipeline because it's a fear factor. I'm afraid of it.
And in terms of the plume modeling and the risk analysis, you haven't been provided any of that, correct?
Right. I didn't hear anything from Summit. No.
Okay. All right. And does that conclude the items on safety that you wanted to discuss?
It can. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. All right. All right. I don't have anything further for you at this time,
Okay.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reinig.
Am I done?
Yes, thank you. Okay. So I think we'll call it a day, Mr. Jorde, unless you've got somebody that you can and want to squeeze in.
I really do. I think we can get them done in 30 minutes here. So right by 8:02, that would be Dennis Jackson.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, appreciate it.